Hi guys, and welcome to this edition of Book Review, this time with rocket legend Alan Bond. So, Alan, in front of us we have an assortment of various different books. Do you recognise any of them, and out of the ones that you do, would you recommend any of them?
Well, yes, I recognise most of the Haynes manuals, the Owner's Workshop series,
Yeah.
which I think are extremely good publications. They're very informative. They've, in all cases, chosen first-class people to do the technical contribution, and they are incredibly well illustrated. Of course, Von Braun's Mars project is an absolute classic, and even today, when you go through this and see the detail that went into this piece of work, it's just amazing. That is very, very good.
Yes, it is great. Like, out of these, I would say that's probably my favourite.
I think so, and I've read this many times, and the follow-on one as well, which he spends a little bit more time in the follow-on talking about Mars itself as a planet and reviewing what was known in the 1950s. It's laughable today in terms of the maps of Mars, Schiaparelli's maps of Mars and so on. But nonetheless, as a piece of scoping work, it's got to stand up very, very well. I'm interested to see that you have a couple of provocative ones. The USS Enterprise and Dander, Pilot of the Future. Of course, Dander is true and the Enterprise is just straightforward fiction, but this is a really good piece of work by Rod Barzilay, and Rod for a long time produced a new version of the Eagle comic, which still goes and is very, very good. But the analysis that's gone into trying to turn Frank Hampson's views into something that might be engineering is really extremely good in this. I spent many years trying to find out whether the spaceships that were in Dander could be made to work, and sadly, without some major breakthroughs in physics, the answer is no. But the same is true of Star Trek, of course, and the Enterprise. What astounded me is that when Star Trek first appeared on our screens, and I won't tell you what we used to call it in those days, but it wasn't Star Trek. This all seemed absolute fiction. And we've got here an image of the matter transporter in operation. What astounds me is the bit of science of this, which might actually come true, is the actual matter transporter, whereas the propulsion, getting to high factors of the speed of light, I see very little chance of that actually working. But since the discovery of quantum entanglement, the possibility of matter transporter actually working one day might actually work.
Interesting.
So what else have we got? Now, one thing that I noticed over on your pile over there is Rendezvous with Rama.
This is... I know so many works of fiction, it's difficult to tell which one's my favourite, but this is definitely on the top 5 list.
So, as with very much that Arthur Clarke produced, this is extremely well conceived. He'd obviously thought a lot about different people's concepts of what might one day constitute what have become known as world ships. And I think you've got to go back to J.D. Bernal in the late 1920s to find the first world ship concepts. But Rama was a really good idea. I'm not so keen on the follow-on versions of Rama.
I haven't read the follow-on ones, but I don't actually plan to, but because from what I'm told, they kind of ruined the thing. But
yeah, I feel that this ended correctly.
Yeah.
Where you're just left with the idea that the Ramans do everything in threes, and that's the very last line of the book. And I feel that was a good place to end this. Rendezvous with Rama, pretty much a masterpiece, I think. And I particularly like the propulsion, because that's what I like, of where it dives into the solar corona and is obviously using solar atmosphere as reaction mass in order to do its mid-course correction and push it on whichever direction it was actually heading to.
That's one interpretation, I suppose. It did appear to be making course corrections before it entered the corona. It did a flip maneuver to re-angle itself. In the book, they concluded that it was a non-Newtonian physics drive. It may just be that it was using the sun's corona's reaction mass. We'd have to see whether it did have those internal gyroscopes that were proposed.
Yeah, I think we could speculate on that, but I don't know what was in Arthur's mind when he wrote it. Let's face it, it is a work of fiction. The Expanse, I liked the comment in there about someone asked the authors, how did the Epstein drive work? And the answer was extremely well. So I think we have to say the same about Arthur's drive for the Raman cylinder. So what else have you got here to...
Well, I've got a few classics. Well, these aren't actually classics.
So The Martian is really very good.
Good enough to be a classic.
I think it's very thought-provoking, which science fiction should be. I think, in my own mind, good science fiction is something that gives you something to go away and think about. Obviously, there's the relaxing stuff where we spend a lot of time sort of playing kick-arse with aliens and things like that. But that's... You don't usually go away having any deep thoughts about that.
Right.
But The Martian is a piece of science fiction that it does make you go away and sort of think, is that how it would really be? What's the environment actually like? Could you really do the things that he's done? I think
not exactly, but I think it's pretty close.
I think it's only let down by the rather gratuitous sort of cliffhanger ending. Where he has to strip the spaceship down in order to do the final bit of jiggery-pokery in orbit to finally meet up with the rescue vessel. I find that slightly gratuitous, and I don't think it would have lost anything by having a fairly straightforward exit.
If I remember correctly, he had to remove 5.7 tons of mass from a 12.3 ton ascent vehicle, I think, which is, he's reducing the weight by half. So, I mean, it's not impossible.
No, I could go along with that. I just felt that from the storyline point of view,
right? Yeah.
The final sort of hold your breath sort of ending was a bit gratuitous, but the rest of the story I enjoyed immensely.
I agree. It was a great read. To be honest, the thing that the only thing I actually found in here, which I find, which actually like annoys me almost. I don't mind the dust storm, that can be explained away by a few other things. The thing that I find really weird is the fact that there was only one radio that he had. None of the pre-supply probes or the rovers or anything had radios on them, but like, there's probably a way to explain that away as well. Overall, I think this is a great book.
It was well thought out, and as I say, it makes you go away and think. Once you've thought about it, you might find all kinds of things that you could quibble with, but it's a great piece of fiction. It certainly makes you think what's coming next. It's a superb read.
Yeah. Now, just going through the other books quickly, there's Earthbound Astronauts, there's Buzz Aldrin's Mission to Mars, which is very good. There's the Physics of Star Trek, which goes into some of the stuff you were talking about with matter transporters.
Yes.
I would disagree with you. I don't think the matter transporters literally teleport objects. I think they just move them at light speed or beyond light speed through space.
It's very vague within Star Trek what actually happens, but in terms of being able to copy something accurately, once upon a time it was felt that within the limitations of quantum mechanics you couldn't copy an object accurately, but it's now realised that in principle it's possible through entanglement to make a precise copy and transport that somewhere else. And so
the question is, could you transport it instantly?
actually getting to the point where you could transport a macroscopic object rather than a subatomic particle or an atomic particle, I think is probably pushing where we're at rather hard. It may never be possible, but at least it's one bit of Star Trek physics which today you could sort of point to and say, at least there's a possibility.
Okay.
Whereas with regard to the way that the Enterprise is supposed to create a sort of space distortion and then ride on it, there's no way at all that we know how to do any of that.
Well, we do in theory, but in practice you need negative mass, which
I don't think we even know how to do that part in theory, so at least there's a theoretical aspect to wormholes, provided you've got a source of negative energy, negative mass. But in order to actually transport an object through physical space at above the speed of light, we know of no way at all that even starts to come onto the cards.
So, the next thing that I should probably talk about, and also, actually, well, other than this, the last thing on the table, is this book, Ad Astra, An Illustrated Guide to Reading the Planet.
Oh.
I've only read it through once, and that was a while ago, but it is very good, and it's written by my friend Dallas Campbell.
I like this one, hanging the spacesuit out on the clothesline.
Yeah.
Very good.
So, by the way, Dallas Campbell actually has a collection of spacesuits.
Really?
He has a real Russian spacesuit, Sokol, I believe it is, a launch and entry suit, and he has one of, if not the best, replica A7L suit in the world. He might actually do a book on spacesuits in the future. I'd like to see
Excellent,
that.
yeah.
But yes, and then the last book on this table, I believe, I'll talk about Seize the Moment in a second, is One Small Step by Jerry Stone. This is a great book about the moon landings. It's aimed more primarily at young children, but it's still interesting if you know a lot about space. And I'm going to be honest, I really like this because of the pop-outs, but it is still interesting, like the way the images are laid out and whatnot. I would recommend looking at this, and it has a full fold-out thing of the newspaper article at the time of the moon landing.
Yes.
So yeah, that's that
Very good,
one.
yeah.
Very good. Also, that's a physical thing, and it has a 3D image on the front.
Very nice.
And then the last book that I want to look at is Where Once We Stood by Christopher Riley and Martin Impey.
Right.
And this I actually want to give to you as a gift. It is an incredible book. It has some glorious pieces of artwork, and it explains step by step what happened, what each of the astronauts did while exploring the lunar surface on all of the missions, and it does it in incredible detail, and it does it in such a way that even if you knew nothing about space, it would still be understandable, but even if you know a lot about space, it's still really interesting.
That is beautiful. Thank you very much, Clarence.
It's a pleasure.
Very, very good. Very much appreciated. Chris Riley is always good.
Yeah.
And, I don't know Martin Impey's work very well, but
Yeah.
I know Chris Riley, and this is going to go into my treasured collection. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. So yeah, that concludes this book review with Alan Bond. We'll probably have another book review at some point with another guest star, but thank you for taking your time to do this.
Thank you very much, Clarence. Very enjoyable.